Hello. 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 Thank you, delegates. Good afternoon. And let me first, I'm delighted to be part of this group with this esteemed panelist. And thank you, People Matters, for allowing me to moderate this session, which is extremely important, as the name suggests, saying that future-proofing L&D, which is bridging the skill gap, as we know that the pace of transformation is happening and everybody there is a need. Thank you so much and welcome the guests and the panelists into the stage and into this session. So a quick context on this entire session is, of course, as we are going through the various digital transformation, the need is changing rapidly. And to address that need, this skill, we need to move out of these traditional L&D methodologies that we used to follow, and how quickly we can get into these adaptive learning methodologies, and what are those and what are the challenges and how we are doing this. It's the context of this entire session. So quickly, not getting into more of the gyan of the context, I would rather, as you have introduced, by the People Matter, we have Dr. Neerav here, Sushma, and Yogesh, who would help us to understand that what are they doing and how they are taking and looking this into future-proofing L&D. I can't agree more with the name and the title of this session. So going quickly to Neerav, how you have implemented the adaptive learning technologies and how did it change your approach to skill development?
Thank you very much, Rituparna, and my fellow panelists. So I think it's very timely when we are discussing the entire theme, how future-proofing the L&D concept. To be very frank with you, while working in the organization, we can't work in silos. We can't avoid what is happening around the geopolitical scenario, the demographical changes, the transformations happening across the organization. L&D function is not also spared out of it. So if I were to share some of the example, and when you were discussing back there at the speaker's launch, I think when we talk about the L&D function, skilling and all, so I could not refrain sharing a quote from Rigveda, which simply says, the amantram aksharam nasti, nasti mulanoshadam, ayogyaham purusho nasti, yojakastra dullabha, which simply says, there is no word in this world which does not contain any mantra. There is no plant in this world which does not contain any medication value. There is no human being in this world which does not contain any skill set or competencies. Then what is missing? Yojakastra dullabha. The right person who can identify the right set of skills in that particular person is missing. And that's where the beginning of any L&D function within the organization. So if I were to share the example of SRK, we initiated the academy, or we call it the SRK School of Institutional Skill, where we train the really fundamentals of the manufacturing. And even if you are having a desire to join the gems and jewelry sector, you don't know D and G about the diamonds and jewelry, one can simply join them, no asking for bonds or agreements that they are mandatorily be working even after their training. So that's where they start, and we did it almost more than a decade back. So while having the applications of the actual skill set which is required for that entire industry, and I hope you will get to appreciate that we work with a sector where out of total 7,000 employees, if you see the average education of 7,000 employees, it's less than primary. So it's only about skilling, not skilling, but the next skilling. So I think that is where we have to have a kind of a very unique and extraordinary the curation of the skill set, which we train our employees and then finally get them over. And I'll come to share the other aspects of in the future course of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neerav. Sushma, taking the clue from what Neerav was talking about, how do you see the difference between the traditional L&D and now this adaptive technologies, the solutions? How do you manage both this?
I think before we go into managing it, it all depends on the kind of culture that we have in the organization. For example, my organization, Motilal Oswal, it's a legacy organization, 37 years into existence. There is a certain way of learning, right? We have put something in place called learnability quotient. So which means that every person needs to achieve a certain amount of learning hours. And that is divided into different categories like functional, soft skill, we have leadership and compliance. So 4 skills. And you can achieve it in whatever way. Even if you go to conference, you can achieve that LQ score as well. And that interestingly is linked to promotions and increments. So because of which my push learning is there, but it's minimum. My pull learning is pretty high. In all the levels. It's not only from the executive level, at all levels, the learning is pretty high. But when it comes to adaptive learning, what we have done is that I cannot cover, right now I have 13,500 people. I cannot, and I have a team which is like really lean, which reports into HR, and then we have the functional learning team, which is also lean. So we cannot have the number of learning hours that they need to achieve in a given year. They will not be able to achieve if they just go ahead with a classroom learning model, right? So what I have done is that I have implemented something called role skill mapping. It was a manual activity for the last 2 years, 2.5 years. Now we have digitized it. It has gone into the appraisal mode. So my expected skills as against the competency, that is mapped to the manager rating, basis which my gap is identified, and basis which the role skill pathway, a learning pathway is created. But again, manual activity is good, but this time with the help of internal technologies we have implemented, and obviously we also have the Perceiver platform as well, one of the platforms. So what we have done is that we have curated the learning pathways for those specifically, those skill gaps. So in short, hyper-personalization, it was only possible because manually we tried it. For the last 2 years, we tried it. Ultimately, we had to switch to AI, which there was no other option for me, right? Or else what would happen is that I would create a learning pathway and people will not complete it. Then it's a loss for me because ultimately my learning coverage does not get covered. But they're doing learning, they are doing other kinds of learnings. They are getting like 70,000 odd badges they are earning in this fiscal year as well. So earning badges is not a concern, but is it applicable to them? That is the area of concern, and hence this role skill mapping using AI technology, I think it has helped us quite a bit right now. Yeah.
Excellent. So with your clues, so you guys are giving me clues that is helping me to build my questions to Yogesh, the next person. So Yogesh, we were talking about this, how can we close the skill gaps, and you were sharing some interesting insights. Can you help the audience also to get that experience from you, that how do you think that we can close these skill gaps? Because business will keep on asking various kind of competencies and skills. What is the right approach to first identify and create the problem statement and then get into the solution?
Thank you. Okay, so before I even answer this question, I would like to take the first word. It says on adaptability. So adaptive learning is what technology is what we are trying to address to this. Let's understand that the humanity has survived the onslaught of diseases, the calamities, the wars, because of the classic way of being adaptable. And this doesn't end there. I mean, we were skilled for various jobs we do, and we could sustain even in harshest of climate. So we became adaptable, and that's how it makes us even live today. Now, when we entered into our education system, there you also need to be adaptable because your own learning style as a student may not be the way that your class teacher or the subject teacher teaches you, right? So in that case, if somebody is not using the learning style, like you are a visual or an auditory and somebody is using another style, you only have to come back and do the self-study. So that again is an adaptability. And even in organizations, despite you do the best of your trainings, there are always the different learning styles. Some people learn by being kinesthetic. They want to actually touch and perform a task as a skill, only then they learn it. But how this technology is addressing the adaptive learning technology is, this is beautifully using the AI and data analytics. So how it operates, to answer your question now, taking the analogy and connecting it over here, the system is now being adaptable. It's not like a structured LMS that a learning path will follow a structure. This is beyond that. It's about AI. Now, how it does, these skills are identified by the behavior and the response as a learner I'm doing to. So the system has the data on my performance. System has the data on the skills, the competency and the proficiency levels, which I rate, which my manager rates, and the gap is addressed through a learning program. Now this learning program is not what the L&D wants it to be. It's a dynamic learning pathway, right? And there's a difference between how the two operate. So the skills gets identified by the predictive analysis, which is also there in adaptive learning technology. It helps you to identify, okay, these are the skills which are, if you ask someone what future skills you are looking at, believe me, it's very difficult for any leader to speak out. But if you ask a simple question, tell me the people working in your team, will they be using the same methods of working in 2 years down the line? Now they will have a different response then, right? So it will help you to identify the skills. Now that is only one part of it. You have identified the skills, but what you will do with it, right? To close, because that's your question, is how to close that gap. So close is addressed by adaptive learning technology, where the learners are given the tailor-made content. And how it works through some AI models, right? So the tailor-made content is available to me. The dynamic learning paths gets created based on my responses in terms of how much time I'm looking at a content, what is the difficulty level I'm looking at. So it also works on Bloom's model, right? The next level is followed, only the first is done. And then finally, the learner is backed by the skill enhancement. Because there's one problem is I'm addressing the gap. But that is like just a solutioning for a problem which we know it is there. What about skilling to a level where I am prepared for tomorrow? So that is known as skill enhancement. That is also possible with this adaptive learning technology, where you can do on-demand courses. You have AI tutors in that, and AI tutors works on NLP, right? So and that also works on your sentiments. So the system can pick out from the sentiments with the type of response, are you really having an anxiety? Or let's say, for example, the cognitive level. The system is so intelligent to understand that whether this program is really overwhelming for you, so adaptively it will reduce the intensity of the program. So the next course or the next minute which you will get is slightly easier or difficult. So all this helps you to address the skill gap. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. Now this brings to me a very interesting question for Dr. Nirav. Like, as long as we were trying to do learning programs through the traditional ways, now this AI, machine learning, what are the challenges that you have faced or you foresee in implementing it with this traditional L&D programs, and how the HR leaders are responding towards it?
It's a very apt question, and I would just put some thoughts as a rejoinder to what Sushma and Yogesh spoke about. Imagine a situation where your organization is having the legacy of more than 6 decades, so it's there in the existence, and they do have all the traditional mindset and traditional way of doing the things. But at the same time, when the leadership gets to know the need of another, I think that is something very critical, where they literally feel the need and then the transformation start. So I think we are living on the curve where only the learning new things won't be enough. We have to keep on identifying new ways of learning new things. And whatever we have been doing might not be working or might not be applicable as a solution for tomorrow. So it's like it is no longer what you do that sets you apart from others, but how you do what you do makes a difference. And especially in the organization when, as I mentioned earlier, when your employee formal education is not so much, at the same time getting them prepared with the state-of-the-art AI and ML, Now imagine they are working on the AI and machine learning tools with this formal education. I think that is something very traditional yet transformative. So I can proudly say that IIM Ahmedabad and Harvard Business School both did a case study, how we had defined the L&D operations and designed a very unique and extraordinary performance management system. They studied it and then they put it as a case. But just to give the example, till the time you are not having the very transparent data of your intervention into the L&D space, you won't be able to get the actual feedback. So I think to get where you want to go, first you need to know where you are. And that's how a transparency and the feedback mechanism work. So we also did try to apply the Kirkpatrick model, and also we are applying all the domains of the design thinking, how we ideate the L&D challenges, how we do the pilot, how we do the prototype and take the feedback. So state-of-the-art interventions are available, but as you rightly mentioned, the challenges are always there, because the moment you say the adaptability, I think that is the biggest challenge. Because the moment you try to introduce your AI and ML solutions, somewhere back of the mind, it's all about psychological safety. That tomorrow what happened to my job, whether my job will be killed or get replaced with the automation or not. So I think it's a perfect paradox between a high touch and high tech, and only the time would say how it is going to be more adaptable, or rather I would say the agile as far as the adaptability of the new intervention in the L&D space is concerned. So I think that is something which all the HR practitioners might be facing in their respective organization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sushma,
I want so to talk about it. It's very evident on your face.
Yes, it is, of course. Actually, to build on that point, which is very interesting, when legacy organizations are there is a set way of learning that has been already inculcated in the minds of people, right? So I could relate to that so much, because in my organization, when I had joined, I knew that digital learning is the way to go. But when I also implemented it, there were obviously a lot of experimentation that you have to do, right? So when we implemented it, we realized that digital learning works really well in two of my businesses, in manager and below career. In the rest of the businesses, above managers, nobody is going into digital learning at all, right? So adaptive learning that we are talking about in terms of AI, that is even now, it's running fantastic over there. For the top level, I tried getting Harvard Management, Udemy, whatever. It was absolutely not working. People were not taking it at all. As soon as I switched to Cornell, ISB, IIM, everybody wanted to do that. And it was on a certain level and above. Obviously, these are my top talent and all of that, right? So, but even now, I know that if I have to implement AI, it can only be for a certain level and below, but that's where my major chunk of population lies. And that's where I cannot reach to the last level. And that's where they need it the most, because they are located in remote locations of India. They are located probably in the most rural part of, Chhattisgarh and places like that, where they have to know what exactly are the SEBI guidelines that are going to get implemented? What regulatory new thing that has come up in the market? What is the, the top official of the regulatory body is talking about, and how it is going to help them sell the product, right? So getting that information at the ground level, located wherever now, because of the digital adoption across India, it is going to be very easy for us. But imagine around 10 years back, the person located in the remotest location, the client knows what exactly is the new regulation that has come, but we don't know what is happening. But that kind of challenge is getting addressed because of the apps available readily at their fingertips. And obviously, there is nothing that is ready-made. You have to customize it. Little bit of customization is needed. Our organization itself, we have around 800 IT people who just work on our apps. On not only obviously learning app, but all the other apps as well. But you need that kind of investment to be done as well. Nothing off the shelf is ever going to work out, I feel, in any organization. Customization to the culture, customization to our audience is absolutely a must. Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree that we need to also build in the culture, the context, and the maturity of the organization and the learners. We can't just go ahead with AI and, start implementing it. Rightly said so, that yes, of course, for every level, we have to customize a little bit for getting the effective learning methodologies. Coming to Yogesh, one thing which is now with this adaptive learning technologies, it has become more personalized. So what do you think about the organization making personalized learning and aligning it to the overall business goals?
Right. So I think that's something very basic to start off. You are aware what the goals you need to achieve. And it always starts from as is, right? So you have a team, the set of people who are already there with some skills with you. Now, the goal is X, and you know to achieve X, you require these skills. And the competency mapping, which you already did, rests in the system, will help you to know exactly where the people lies. Now, the art is in the adaptive technology, how it helps. It works on certain AI models, right? As I was telling in my earlier part. Now, let's understand how it operates. So first thing, it thinks about, okay, if I have to create a learning pathway, it should have 2-3 things to be addressing to. One, it should have the level of difficulty which should be slightly more than what a person can adjust, right? So it will not be something I'm aware of, but something which I would like to be knowing, and for which I'll give some learning scaffolding for you. Learning scaffolding means I'll give you some links, I'll give you some references, I'll give you some articles. So while going through it, you may like to read more, right? So that helps me at the first level as a learner, that if I'm doing something, I'm doing beyond than what I already know. Second thing is about the space learning, right? The space repetition. Because the forgetfulness will keep on coming. And that's what Ebbinghaus did the experiment and realized there's a forgetful curve with everyone. So while even doing the journey, see, in current days, it's not possible anyone to complete the entire pathway. It has to be staggered in some days, maybe in a week, 2, 3, right? So in that journey, what you learned in the day 1 or maybe the first week, it should also stay with you for the subsequent week, right? So the Ebbinghaus principle, the forgetful curve will come in. To avoid that, this system, the adaptive learning technology is smart enough to understand this is the time when possibly the loss will happen. So the right content, which is important, is coming up in one or the other way. The system throws it back to you. So it addresses that. The third, which I was discussing with Ritu during the break, see, we all have data packs with us. The data is coming like from all corners, right? 8 seconds is what the attention of a span of individual is. But as a learner, if somebody would see that the data is something to be consumed, so any learning program, if we look at as a consumer, as a participant, that will not work. So what adaptive technology does is, they engage you with some interactivity, right? So it will nudge you to, during the exercise, to do some task. Because the moment you attached with something, the learning comes. And that's why you have gamifications, you have challenges, wherein like you do something activity, otherwise it becomes a passive learning. So that's on the part of how they are designed. Now, the logics of AI, certain tools they use like, BKT, which is Bayesian knowledge tracing, which checks, there's some probability. Again, the probability and stats are also part of it. They check what is a probability that the learner will know the concept basis on the past responses, right? So that logic helps you to create those dynamic learning paths. Similarly, like item space or item response. So item response technology says that, okay, if somebody is not able to respond to the question, then I will need to reduce the complexity. The easy question should, otherwise what will happen? The learner will drop it and say, Baba, mere ko kuch samajh nahi aa raha, bekar hai, and chhod ke chala jayega. So you should also create, so that is also part of technology, right? And with the entire model, even the clicks you do, the time you spend, all these things create the dynamic learning path and the right adaptive technology, because once it becomes my personalized learning path. And the good part is, if you spend time on the scaffolding, like the references materials a lot, system will even tell you, look, it seems you are enjoying, so why don't you do a particular course on this? This is where the skill X will be addressed. And in the industry, so many people are doing, and so many people are doing in your company. Now, that's the level of technology we are talking about. And of course, when it gets linked, then achievement of goals become easier because it becomes my learning. I'm choosing at my pace. Nobody's pushing me to do it in a traditional classroom. Thank you.
Excellent. So that comes to Dr. Nirav. The question is, what technology do you think would significantly impact the future of learning?
I won't say there won't be, I would answer it differently. There won't be a single technology would be leading or having the extraordinary influence over the new age. It's like a pure mixed model. Like we said that it would be a perfect mix, and now we are talking about the curated learning or a personalized learning. So we can't throw and have the homogeneity with regards to the LNOD intervention across the supply chain. It has to be curated based on the nature of operations, based on the portfolio and the domain and the expertise level, and of course the agility of that person as a human being, because we can't be rated in the same merits. So adaptive learning curve, and I'm not going into detail, but there is a theory called Dunning-Kruger effect. The learning is an ocean. So the moment you start learning, you'll build the confidence upon a sharp peak, and then again it start declining, even if you are learning new and new things. So that is something which comes as a backpack. So I think it has to be curated. It has to be in a nature where the acceptance or the buy-in of the internal as well as the external stakeholders could be curated. Because unless you don't create and curate that buy-in within them, I think they won't be able to adapt that solution in a true sense. And then entire efforts of the L&D or the HR department gets into the vein. So, and then as far as we have to first make them aware that they are safe in their psychological state, because again it comes from the bottom of the pyramid about the psychological safety. And I truly believe, in a personal opinion, that AI is not grown good enough that it could replace the human being at the workplace. The only thing which has happened over a period of time, especially last decade, the priorities of the organization has changed. And I think that is a perfect play between a priority and actually finding the right purpose of the organization, where the way they are running their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Sushma, I have a favorite question of the CEOs and the CHROs. After all this, how do you measure and how do you see the ROI of this?
ROI, the deadliest question of all, isn't it? The sector you are referring to. Yes, of course. Every day I'm asked that question, and every day I have to come up with different ways, not really every day, but every few months I have to come up with different ways in which I can measure it, right? So, different things, different ways to measure different things, right? So when it comes to any kind of intervention, the thumb rule that I follow is that any intervention you begin with, just like how you're designing or doing a FGD, find out how exactly you will be measuring the ROI. If the contracting is done in the beginning, that's when you will be able to show the effectiveness. If later on you try to figure out, oh, अभी हो तो गया session, अभी क्या करूँ? Customer centricity कर तो दिया, अभी effectiveness कैसे दिखाओ? It's not going to happen. Right? So in the beginning, figure out what are the targets. It can be anything. It can be related to sales. It can be related to the TAT. It can be related to absolutely anything. Processing time. It can be related to attrition, team attrition, promotion, self-team. It can be related to role movement, self-team. It can be related to absolutely anything at all. But we have to figure out a way. It can also be related to 360 movement. Is there a needle shift, right? It can be absolutely anything. When it comes to digital, it can be NPS. It can be related to their KRAs, whether there is a shift that has happened. But which also means there has to be absolutely transparent data, which all of us know that HR data is not that transparent, and neither is business data that transparent to be available for HR or L&D professionals for that matter. So we need to have a grasp of those things. When you have a centralized repository, not confidential data, all right, confidential data when it comes to promotion, when it comes to increment, the 9-box grid, the ABC categorization, let it be with HR. But the rest of the data, it should be available for everybody's consumption, I feel. So having that in place, that's when you'll be able to figure out the ROI in the right way. And then you put the measures in place, right? For example, currently, for our LDP programs, the reason why I'm showing that is because we have two of my talent leads sitting over here. So last year, I had completed around 100 people. I had covered around 100 odd people who are currently active in the system, who had completed the LDP programs. So now we need to show the effectiveness for that. Thankfully, we have been tracking their role movement, their promotions, also tracking their build versus buy ratio. Because of that, we are safeguarded, right? But we also need to move a little bit ahead. We also need to move ahead with not only their promotions, but their team's promotions, their attrition, their team's attrition, their KRAs, their team's KRAs. Because ultimately, when we are doing a leadership development program, it's not about them. It's about how many leaders are you able to create under you, right? So the same way it comes to soft skill training as well. Anything that you do, put a measurement in place, and every training is going to be different, right? So we have to figure it out by ourselves, along with the business, of course.
Thank you so much. I know it's a very, very difficult question, but thank you for addressing it. And here we call it up. That's how the session and the questions for each one of you. Just to summarize what we have learned from this session, it is more to have a balanced approach with this adaptive technology solutions, understanding the maturity, and also creating that legacy and the modern part hand in hand, which would actually help all of us to build that future-proofing L&D. And thank you so much, the panelists, for addressing it. And this is very, very important for us. And we know that how crucial L&D, the learning and development for each one of us. Thank you so much. I'm on time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for finishing in time. A big round of applause, please, for our expert speakers for sharing such strong perspectives on learning and development. So many ideas, so many thoughts for all of us.